Day 595 of the Trump administration. And the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, told the Associated Press tonight that President Trump will not answer Robert Mueller's questions in writing or in person on the subject of obstruction of justice. But earlier tonight, Giuliani told NBC News obstruction questions are not ruled in or out. We'll have much more on this and an attempt to sort it all out in just a moment. But first, President Trump just wrapped up a rally way out west, far from the troubled atmosphere inside his own West Wing. If it's Thursday, it must be Billings, Montana, where tonight they heard the president attack the anonymous official from his own administration who wrote that surprising and scathing op-ed yesterday in the New York Times.
The latest act of resistance is the op-ed published in the failing New York Times by an anonymous, gutless coward. You just look. He was, nobody knows who the hell he is, or she, although they put he, but probably that's a little disguised. That means it's she. But for the sake of our national security, the New York Times should publish his name at once. I think their reporters should go and investigate who it is. That would actually be a good scoop. That would be a good scoop. Unelected deep state operatives who defy the voters to push their own secret agendas are truly a threat to democracy itself.
The New York Times is reporting tonight that the White House has a list of suspects and ideas are being floated to catch the author. Quote, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, an ally of Mr. Trump's, recommended that the president force members of his administration to take polygraph examinations. And there was, at least briefly, some discussion of that among advisors to the president. Another option mentioned by people close to Mr. Trump was asking senior officials to sign sworn affidavits that could be used in court if necessary. One outside advisor said the White House had a list of about 12 suspects. Meanwhile, many close to the president are racing to say it's not them and to put as much distance between themselves and the op-ed as possible. So far, over 24 administration officials have denied they are the author of the piece as the White House searches for what they call the anonymous, gutless coward. And today, a new report from Axios says there are plenty of White House officials working in that, quote, quiet resistance. Quote, two senior administration officials reached out to Axios to say the author stole the words right out of their mouths. Quote, I find the reaction to the New York Times op-ed fascinating that people seem so shocked that there is a resistance from inside, one senior official said. A lot of us were wishing we'd been the writer. I hope Trump knows, maybe he does, that there are dozens and dozens of us. First Lady Melania Trump also weighed in today after beginning her statement by saying free press is important to our democracy. First Lady continued to write in part, if a person is bold enough to accuse people of negative actions, they have a responsibility to publicly stand by their words, and people have the right to be able to defend themselves. To the writer of the op-ed, you are not protecting this country. You are sabotaging it with your cowardly actions. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders ramped up her attacks on the New York Times today by releasing a phone number for the newspaper. She told people on Twitter, if they want to know the author of the op-ed, ask the Times. Jonathan Lemire of the Associated Press has new reporting tonight on the president's reaction to all of this. Let's bring in our leadoff panel for a Thursday night. The aforementioned Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press. Nancy Cook, White House reporter for Politico. Eli Stokols, White House reporter for the LA Times. We welcome all three back to the broadcast. Mr. Lemire, Trump went on a rant out in Montana tonight. Of note on social media, his pronunciation of anonymous, also talking about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. He said many of us know it by memory. That was notable. Went on a rant about impeachment, almost treating himself as a disassociated third-person character of it. What does it say about what you know to be his state of mind?
He also suggested that Lincoln was in the Gettysburg Address was something that was not too popular at the time, but
like his speeches.
Like his speeches. As the decades went on, it was seen more favorably. He predicted the same for himself.
Yep.
So he made the Lincoln comparison. Certainly, this is a moment where impeachment or certainly crisis is on the mind of the president and the people closest to him. He is, in our reporting, sort of in a very much a bunker mentality right now, where he is not sure who he can trust. He believes that it's not just perhaps the mythical deep state that has been there in place before he arrived, but even some of his closest advisors have been working perhaps against him. This op-ed comes on the heels of the Woodward book, and they seem to be on very much the same theme. The presidency getting in the way of the president, trying to stop him, trying to get in between him, his worst impulses perhaps, and the American people. This is a remarkable scene today where we had some of his cabinet members, some senior aides, even the vice president.
Falling all over them.
Exactly right. Had to go out there publicly on the record say, it wasn't me. I didn't write this. A number of them threw in a bunch of attacks on the media to sort of further please the audience of one watching in the Oval Office. The White House certainly is trying to sort out who did this. The president is our reporting is absolutely incensed. He is fuming. He is talking to confidants. He believes there's no one he can trust. He's even casting some doubt, perhaps, on members of his own family. Remember, some of them work in the building, that they have been too leaky with reporters at times. And that the question now is, does this go beyond just asking Press Secretary Sanders or Chief of Staff Kelly to sort of ask around and see what's going on? Does he call for some sort of formal governmental inquiry into this? Something that Rudy Giuliani told me tonight. That would set off alarm bells throughout Washington.
And during all this, how did the Trump agenda advance today is always our question. Hey, Nancy, I saw in your notes somebody from the West Wing said to you, honestly, it could be anybody. What else did you learn from the inside today?
Well, I just think from a staff perspective right now, there's a few different points. One is that people feel like, it could be so many people in the administration that, it's hard to just narrow it down to a dozen or 10 people because there's so many people who entered into the White House not necessarily being loyal to Trump, but they wanted to bolster their resume or sort of further a personal ideology they had, but they didn't really support the campaign. And then secondly, I feel like there's a real heightened sense of paranoia right now inside the White House. People are very worried after Omarosa's book that people are taping conversations, that anyone could be stabbed in the back at any time by their colleagues. They're worried that stories about them will end up in a tell-all book. And there's just this real sense that you can't trust anyone. And I think that goes from the president all the way down to, aides throughout the West Wing and even throughout the agencies.
Eli Stokols, interesting times at the New York Times. They made news themselves about a week ago when they suddenly removed the bylines from the front page so we can't look for the writing of our favorite writers and reporters. And now this consequential decision, which must have come out of, I assume, several rounds of talks and assurances. What do you make of the timing of this, obviously, vis-a-vis the Woodward book, which is yet to go on sale, let's remember, and the Supreme Court hearings on the Hill? Do you think they are related and coordinated?
Well, I have no reason to think that, and just listening to what James Dow, the editorial page editor, has said publicly about this is that they received this transcript before they knew that the leaks of the Woodward book were going to come out. They weren't thinking about some sort of 1-2 punch or overshadowing the Kavanaugh hearings. They found something they thought was newsworthy. They made a controversial decision to publish an anonymous op-ed, and here we are. I think the interesting thing is everybody is searching for and playing this parlor game trying to figure out who done it. I think you have to step back and ask yourself, why now? As John and Nancy have talked about, a lot of our sources inside the West Wing, people who talk to the press a lot, have expressed similar frustrations and similar characterizations of this West Wing as we read in that op-ed. The question is, why now somebody decided to go out and poke the bear by putting this out publicly, even if they're not putting their name on it. They knew it would get a reaction. And I think what it tells you is that after the last couple of weeks, after we see the SDNY investigation continuing, that's an existential threat to this president. You have the poll numbers going down, the election getting closer, the Mueller probe perhaps nearing an end stage. And you have a lot of people, I think, inside this White House now sort of thinking more long term and considering that there could be an end game coming into play before long. And I think that the fact that somebody decided to send this to the New York Times now, the timing of it is almost as interesting as if we were to figure out who actually wrote it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.